welcome to another sound sculpting session. Today I'm going to be looking at a lovely, lush, warm, hazy, pulse width modulated string pad sound, which is one of my favourite of the what I consider to be the canonical analogue synth sounds. Really, just takes me right back to my childhood where I first heard synths and fell in love really with that atmosphere they can create, the hazy, dreamy atmosphere you can really immerse yourself in. And I was hoping the Nymphes would be good at it, and it is. Once you start playing with the LFO2 and pulse width modulation, you can really get some thick sounds, especially if you use tri-mode and double up the voices, which only gives you 3-note polyphony, but you kind of don't need any more when it sounds that thick. And I have a Cheetah MS6, which is quite an obscure mid-80s British analog synth that wasn't necessarily great at everything, but it was really good at these kind of sounds. And sadly, it is not working at the moment, so I was hoping the Nymphes would be able to fill that gap for me. And in my opinion, it does so admirably. So this is the kind of sound we're going to be aiming for. Sizzle. You would not believe this is a one oscillator synth. I mean, I am cheating a little bit by doubling them up, but there you go. So, how are we going to get there? So first of all, as always, I'm going to go for a default sawtooth patch. In my case, that is a bank 7, sound 7. Horrible brash sawtooth sound. We're not going to play around with voice mode on this to start with. I'm going to put it on tri eventually, but let's keep it as poly, and it still sounds good in poly mode. And that gives you 6 notes, note polyphony, so that can be useful too, especially if you want to play across multiple octaves. Pulse width, we're going to keep it around the middle. No glide. Tiny bit of detune, like just a touch. No chord mode for now. No pitch modulation from the envelope too, or filter / pitch envelope. Let's have just a tiny hint of sub-oscillator and the main oscillator around 2/3 of the way up. We might want to modulate the volume using velocity. I'm probably not going to, but you could have that as an option. Filter cut off about 1/3 of the way up on the low pass. I'm not going to have any high pass filter for this one. You could do if you wanted to thin it out a bit for the mix, but I just wanted maximum warmth. Tiniest little hint of resonance. Really don't want much because that thins it out as well, and it takes away some of the warmth. And so you could even have that as 0, but I just like to have a little bit just to add complexity to the tone contour a little bit. And filter envelope, let's have that roughly 1/3, a bit over 1/3. What's that like? Okay. Now let's turn the tracking down. We want a bit of filter tracking, but I do actually want it softer on the higher notes. Still sounding pretty harsh, but it will come together once we get some envelope in there. And certainly once we get the LFOs working. So Let's just also have a tiny bit of LFO on the filter and a tiny bit on the pitch as well. Still sounds quite brash and organ-like for now. Let's go straight onto the envelopes then. Want a fairly slowish attack, a bit of a swell going on, but not like a super long one. And a bit of decay, quite a longish decay going down to slightly below maximum volume at the end, and then a decent amount of release. And a similar kind of contour, perhaps a slightly slower attack and decay on the filter. Lots of long settings for the decay and sustain, release. Yeah, sounds nice. Okay. So this is where it starts to come together, is the LFOs. Let's go for... I'm actually going to have a bit of delay on the LFO, so it takes a bit of time to start the vibrato effect. No fade. Speed wise, let's try about 3/4. Triangle wave. Sounds quite cool. Maybe let's have it coming in a bit later. Maybe let's turn the LFO down a tiny bit on the pitch and on the filter. Ooh, that's the envelope. Quite a nice vibrato speed there. That's sounding already a lot lusher. Now we've got the LFO and envelope in there. Yeah, very nice. Okay, now the most important bit for this sound, as you might expect, is the pulse width modulation, which we can only do with LFO2. Good old trusty LFO2, which is the ace up the sleeve of this synth in my view, really, or one of them. So menu 2, let's have a rate that's fairly high, I think, about 3/4 of the way up, maybe a bit more. Triangle wave, make sure that delay and fade are at 0 for now. I want this to be going all the time, and plus for a polyphonic sound you kind of don't want the second LFO, which is monophonic, to do anything different really when you're triggering different notes. You want it just going in the background on everything. We won't hear anything yet because we haven't made it do anything, but let's try whacking a load of pulse width modulation on there and see. Let's set a rate. We've already set the rate, so that's all right. It's just about getting the rate right with and intensity right with strings, PWM strings. So sounding, can you hear the difference? It sounds really kind of chorus now. Oh, I've just made it change the wave. I might actually have a tiny bit of wave modulation on there just to add interest. Yeah, that's not far off, to be honest. We could maybe make it just do a tiny bit of res, tiny bit of filter modulation. I often like to add a few extra just tiny modulations so that we get that variation that makes sounds subtly interesting. Let's maybe make it just slightly affect the pitch LFO and a tiny bit more detune, so we just get a bit more drift going on. Maybe a little bit of tremolo effect by just affecting the volumes of different things a bit as well. Let's see. Yeah, sounds really nice, I think. lush and warm. That'll do for LFO2 for now. A bit of reverb, let's go menu 3. Don't need tons of reverb, let's have the filter quite low. We don't want that lovely lush warmth spoiled by too much metallic ringing for this, but reasonable decay length I think, and size not too low because that affects the amount of overtones. Let's have a look. That's about that's good. You can adjust that to taste, of course. Yeah, I like that a lot. Maybe we could make the mod wheel affect the filter. Bring up the filter a bit, I think. Let's make it, so we're in menu 4 for mod wheel modulations. Let's make it bump up the filter envelope a bit. Maybe a tiny bit of res. And perhaps the amount of filter LFO a tiny bit as well. Pitch LFO and filter. Let's make the filter LFO go up a bit as well. And maybe increase the speed of the LFO a bit. Go out of that. Let's turn down the filter by default. So we can have it really soft and then bring it in. If you're setting the mod wheel, it's good to go to the top and kind of set that how you like. So now we've got it really soft at the bottom. Sounds pretty awesome.